So let's go to questions. How can you help the dizziness caused by this, and should you avoid nuts and seeds? I don't understand the last half of that question. The dizziness of this, how do you affect the dizziness as you change your diet? I mean, really, ultimately, if you're suffering with any of the symptoms of mast cell activation or histamine, in my opinion, you've got to rule out gluten sensitivity. You've also got to rule out other food allergies and food sensitivity. So get testing done. Testing can definitely open a whole new gateway, because what we said a minute ago is these are foods that are safe. But what if you're allergic to the beef? What if you're allergic to the apple? What if you're allergic to the egg? That's my point, is these are generally safe, but testing can open up a whole new realm of specificity for you as a unique individual to really get the help that you want to get if you're trying to avoid elevations in histamine. Let's see, my nose allergy got better after I went ketovore. Any connection? Yeah, because a ketovore diet is generally, it's a gluten-free diet, right? And you're eating foods in a ketovore diet. Generally, I mean, most ketovores that I know are eating fresh meats, not a ton of processed beef jerky and a bunch of junk meat. So a very gluten-free diet, that it can be very, very effective in that way as it refers to histamine. Just took my daughter to the ER today for swollen eyes and throat swelling and still don't know why. So Beverly, you got to get the right testing done. You ask your allergist or whoever the doctor is, like, ask for these things. Let's just put a list here. Because we didn't really talk about this. So there's several tests that you can have run that, if you have the answers to, can be life-altering for that person who's really struggling. And one of those tests is food allergy testing. Simply food allergy, but specifically IgE. Now, a lot of times the allergist will run a skin prick. So you'll go to the allergist and they'll do a skin prick against about 8 foods. That's the common 8 allergens is what most immunologists or allergists will check for. It's not enough. 8 foods, you could be allergic to a lot more than 8 foods. And so what happens, remember, with histamine, the more you're producing, the more that's there, the more your body becomes sensitized, the more your immune system is sensitized, the more allergies you start to collect, in a sense. So it's very important to know this out of the gate. And so you want to do more than 8. So not just 8 foods. Okay, demand that they test you for every food they can test you for. And also, you don't want this. I don't recommend the skin prick as much as I recommend the blood. So have them look at IgE in your blood. This is where the reactions are firing off. The skin prick tests can be very misleading and they're not as accurate as the blood tests are. And again, you want to test for as many foods as they can pull out of their arsenal. So that's one. Then you want to test for something called the delayed hypersensitivity. And so this is less obvious, these types of reactions. You want to also make sure you're measuring against food and chemical exposures, because you could be reacting to your toothpaste, you could be reacting to your soaps and lotions and shampoos or other things. And so foods and chemicals that you might be reacting to in a more delayed fashion, but it primes your immune system to be overly aggressive, and it primes your mast cells to hyper-release even at the slightest touch. And so you want to know what these are, and you want to know what these are, because if you know what these two things are, then you can customize, change your diet, you can customize, change the things that you're doing, and that's going to stabilize your immune system, and it's going to make it less overreactive, because that's really what's happening with mast cell activation or with hyperreactivity, when we get the urticaria, the swelling and all that, is the immune system is just on high alert. So if we understand what these things are, these are removable. These things we can adjust. Now, something else that can be measured that I would suggest you ask your doctor to measure, most of them probably won't even have ever heard of it, but you want to ask them to measure diamine oxidase. Like, this can be measured. It can be measured in the blood. Because if you're low here, what that means, and remember, where we break down most of our dietary histamine is in the gut. That's where most DAO is activated. So there's another enzyme that can break down histamine in your body, but DAO is the primary enzyme that breaks down histamine from the food that you eat. So that happens within the GI tract. But you can measure that DAO, and if that DAO is low, And that's a prompt for you, okay? So if it's low, it's a prompt to eat lower histamine. And this may not be a permanent diet change, but it may be something you have to do for a time as you're trying to stabilize your immune system's overreactivity, because these two things, avoiding these food groups of things you're reactive to here, will over time will allow your immune system to calm down, and eating lower foods that are high in histamine, if you don't have adequate DAO to break histamine down, can be helpful as well, because it's not, the burden is reduced on your body. So this can be measured. You can ask your doctor to measure this. You can ask your doctor to measure your total IgE. Because IgE, as a total, it stimulates mast cells to release their histamine. You can also measure the blood level of histamine. So these are all things that are easy to measure, right? But the key is, don't just measure these. A lot of times I see doctors will just measure IgE and just measure histamine. And the problem with that is, when you have that information, now we ask the question, why? Why do you have high histamine? Why do you have high IgE? Generally, you would have high histamine or IgE because of these reasons, right? You're being exposed to something that your body doesn't like. So although these tests can be helpful, they don't tell you the why, they only tell you the what. These tests tell you the what. That's why we prioritize these types of tests first. Another test that would be highly recommended would be micronutrient testing, specifically to many of your antioxidants like vitamin C, because if your micronutrient levels are low, if your vitamin C levels are low, you're going to have a harder time producing that DAO, and that could be, fundamentally a problem for you. So these are things that you can ask a doctor to run, whether or not they know how to run them. One of the things that I always get people say, well, what if my doctor's never heard of the test? Find a different doctor. Here's the thing, if your doctor's never heard of the test, they're not the expert. You don't want to get somebody who can run the test but then doesn't know how to interpret it or doesn't understand what they're actually looking at. So you look for a doctor who can run these tests, and don't necessarily depend on the doctor that you have if they've never heard of these things. You don't want to be teaching your doctor all the things they need to know on how to help you find the answer. If you're teaching the doctor, you're in trouble. It should be the opposite. The doctor should be teaching you. Okay. Can histamine intolerance show up on the skin appearing as pityriasis rosacea or eczema? Yes, it can, particularly eczema. Is all long cooked and leftover food a potentially high histamine source? For the most part, the older the food, the more aged the food, the greater the risk of histamine, yes. Is there a better way to make bone broths and stocks that won't trigger the histamine response? No, unfortunately, there's not really a better way. Like I said, one of the things that you can do is you can take supportively, you can take something like a Hist Assist, before you eat, okay? Before you eat. Some people even gravitate toward taking some of these supplements that contain DAO in them. The problem I've seen with those supplements is most of them, if you're gluten sensitive, have gluten fillers in them. So I haven't seen one yet that didn't have a gluten filler. We're actually working on that right now, my team and I. So, but as of right now, I haven't seen one without a gluten filler. If you go gluten-free, does your stool change, and what should we be aware of? That's a massive question, Michael. Your stool can change depending on where it's at originally. If you have, if some people with gluten sensitivity before they go gluten-free have constipation, and some people have diarrhea. Generally speaking, what we like to see happen is the stool normalizes. You have regular normal bowel movements again, because going gluten-free for many stabilizes the GI milieu and helps with motility and appropriate motility accurately. If you live a negative lifestyle, indulging in a lot of alcohol and a healthy diet, trauma drugs, prescription pills, and more, do we have a fighting chance? Yeah, you always have the fighting chance. So the first thing to remember is what you did in your past is not who you have to be in your future. You may be the accumulation of what you've done in your past, and so you may have created a mess for yourself and your health, but you have the option and the ability to change all of those things. Remember, your body is so amazing and so dynamically resilient at healing. And so don't get into a state of hopelessness. If you had a bad history and did a lot of things wrong, forgive yourself and move forward and quit doing those things and seek out better changes and treat your body with the dignity and respect it deserves. Let's see here. What's your take on, well, I'm not going to go there. Let's see. I'm allergic to chlorine in tap water. Yeah, me too. Have big sinus, sneeze, red eye, etc. Any way to minimize. Can't put a filter in an apartment. Yeah. So there are shower head filters you can screw on the shower that have granular activated carbon and KDF in them, and it will pull out a lot of the chlorine. So you can minimize your reactivity by putting a shower head filter on, even in an apartment. They're screw-on head filters. The other thing I'd recommend is get a desktop or a kitchen countertop reverse osmosis filter. Maybe Mel can pop up that link for that filter that we like. There's a great company that makes an RO desktop filter that you can take with you. You don't have to install it. It doesn't require major plumbing or anything. You just take it out of the box and start filtering your water. Is there a way to calm histamine reactions without taking H1 or H2 blockers? Yeah, my favorite way, Tammy, is vitamin C, but heavy doses. A mixture of vitamin C and quercetin, 5 grams of vitamin C, 4 to 5 grams of quercetin, spaced out over the course of the entire day, not all in the same dose, because it'll cause you to have diarrhea if you take 5 grams of C all at once, at least most of you. But those work really, really well, again, at helping stabilize the mast cell membranes to kind of calm down some of those immune responses. But I've seen people with severe allergies add vitamin C and quercetin, and it's like, wow, I can't believe what a huge change that made. So those are definitely things that you could consider natural support with. What's a good substitute for NAC? So again, what I talked about, quercetin. So there's no good substitute for NAC, by the way. NAC is, in my opinion, one of the most powerful natural substances known to man. It works in so many different ways. So there's no great substitute for it, but you can use the C, you can use the quercetin and the nettle. Is a histamine response for mast cell activation syndrome always accompanied by elevated eosinophils? No, it's not. And so it's a good point. So it's another test you could ask your doctor to run would be to look at your eosinophil counts, down here. And if you have high levels of eosinophils, there's a higher likelihood that you have allergic responses to things that you're being exposed to through your environment or through your foods. And there's a greater potential that you're going to release more histamine overall. But it's not, you could have elevated eosinophils and it could be caused by a parasite. There are other things that elevate your eosinophils beyond the MCAS category. Let's see, on MRI, left side sinus mucosal thickening, gold standard for histamine issues. Not really. You can have sinus mucosal thickening in your sinus cavities for a lot of different reasons. One of the more common reasons, though, that I've seen has to do with environmental mold. The mold gets up into your sinuses, you breathe it in, it gets up in the mucus and it starts to colonize, and then it creates biofilms, and it just kind of sits there and stays in you, releasing mold and or mycotoxins and other chemicals that can activate your immune system and really create problems. I developed histamine intolerance after using a progesterone cream, now allergic to my own hormone. It probably wasn't the progesterone cream that caused it. At least that wouldn't be my number one suspicion. I'd say it may be some of the things that were in the progesterone cream, like the filler ingredients. But progesterone, usually women that take progesterone actually report oftentimes that they do better with mast cell problems because, again, that differentiation between progesterone and estrogen. Is it true that serotonin syndrome is a severe form of histamine or tyramine intolerance or complications? No. Serotonin syndrome can be caused by a lot of different reasons, and those are not the only things that we see. Have you seen a lot of people with electromagnetic hypersensitivity or EMR as the biggest trigger of histamine release? No, not as the biggest one, Lauren, but definitely as one. I think what happens a lot of times, and again, this is just my experience, so your experience and others may be different, but these are my experiences clinically speaking. So when we see people with EMF sensitivity, a lot of times you got to understand what causes this in the first place. Mold, EMF stimulates the growth of mold. So let's say you have mold in your sinuses or you have a candida overgrowth in your GI tract, and so you've got a mold issue. that you're dealing with, and then you're around EMFs all day long. That EMF just, again, it builds into, there've been some studies that show that mold proliferates more aggressively when exposed to EMF. And so where I see EMF sensitivity is almost always there's a mold issue. And because most people that I see tolerate EMF just fine if they don't have a mold or other immunosuppressing things going on with their body. They generally tend to tolerate EMF by itself. And the EMF is something that develops, EMF intolerance is something that develops as a result of all these other variables creating the perfect storm in the immune system. And now the person has lost their ability to tolerate the environment, including exposure to electromagnetic frequencies. I like that. So RT says, just drinking nettle tea started to feel much better. Love that. Have you seen a lot of people with, let's see, I just answered that one. Does blastocystis cause more histamine? It can. Blastocystis is a type of parasite. How important is riboflavin in histamine management? All B vitamins are important, but I wouldn't give riboflavin a place on a throne of importance there. Let's see here. Is there a way to calm histamine? Oh, see, I answered that one. Go down the left for me. Is gluten a neurotoxin for everyone or just those who are sensitive to it? Nicole, that's a good question. We believe it's a neurotoxin for those that are sensitive to it. Now, there are other agents in grains that can also be neurotoxins, where people who aren't gluten sensitive may still find themselves reacting to grains. For example, pesticides like glyphosate. Molds are commonly found in grain. Mycotoxins are commonly found in grain and can trigger neurological responses as well. Exposure to burn pits. Okay, so exposure to burn pits, leaving heavy metals and much more, causing the potential for tumors and cancer. Does going gluten-free help detox and heal? If it does, if you're gluten sensitive. If you're gluten sensitive and you're trying to heal and repair and you haven't gone gluten-free yet, it isn't going to happen. You're just going to be, you're just going to be spinning your wheels. Do you have any recommendations for nebulizing hydrogen peroxide for gut health and microbiome? Yeah, my recommendation is you don't need to do that. A lot of people are jumping on that nebulized hydrogen peroxide. And look, that's not to say that it doesn't have benefits or can't be, but it's almost like it's the wrong step to take first. The right step to take first is change your diet, change your lifestyle. There's 7 fundamental factors. If you haven't changed, you shouldn't be doing things like nebulizing other ingredients unless you have a severe acute respiratory disorder in your lungs, because that's generally what nebulizers are designed to do. They're designed to aerosolize medicinal agents to get that into your lungs as quickly as possible so that it can bypass the stomach and the GI tract. So if you don't have, again, an acute respiratory issue, then nebulizing these things are going to be of limited benefit if you haven't changed your diet, if you don't get sunshine, if you don't exercise, if you're not drinking clean air, or rather breathing clean air and drinking clean water, if you're not monitoring and maintaining healthy levels of stress. Like if you're not doing those things, no amount of nebulized anything is going to save the day for any kind of health issue that you have. Okay, let's go down on the left and on the right. Is there a point of no return for damaging your gut or digestive tract? Yeah, the point of no return is when you have to have, when you opt to have surgical removal of aspects of your gut. Otherwise, there is no point of no return. I've seen 90-year-olds get better. So if a 90-year-old can do it, so can you. Let's see here. Are DAO supplements safer and or effective as H1, H2 blockers? So they don't block H1 and H2. Understand DAO supplements only provide a source of diamine oxidase to help you digest histamine that you eat in your diet. So it's in essence, it's kind of analogous to taking a digestive enzyme, right? So DAO is not going to block H1 or H2. It's just simply going to, degrade the histamine from the food that you eat. So are the histamine-releasing fruits and veggies, are they less likely to release histamine if they're cooked? Not necessarily. Some are and some aren't. Is it okay to eat applesauce if you have a histamine problem? Is it better to keep the applesauce in the fridge? Yeah, I mean, you can eat fresh applesauce. You know, if you're eating refrigerated applesauce, it has a tendency to grow mold rather quickly. So, you know, that's where you have to be careful. It's just the longevity of the storage and the shelf life. Which, let's see here, once we got rid of the carpet, yeah, I like that. Getting rid of carpet helped you quite a bit because carpet's a hotbed for mold. Let's see here, keep going down. What about IgG food reactions? So IgG's a mixed bag. I don't recommend IgG testing because IgG testing is very misleading. You make two different kinds of IgG antibodies. You make ones that are helpful and you make the other ones that could signify you have a food reactivity. That's the problem though with the testing, is that most of the time people get IgG tested for food and they come back and it looks like they're allergic to everything that they eat, and that can be very misleading, and it can be very, let's just say, off-putting, because now you don't know what to eat. A good allergy testing doesn't just look at IgG, and it also separates helpful IgG from hurtful IgG. We're actually getting ready to bring that type of testing direct to consumers. It's a project my team has been working on diligently for the last several months, just because most doctors don't know enough about this topic and this information, and they oftentimes will gravitate to those IgG tests. And then their patients will get so confused when they can't eat anything. So I don't recommend IgG testing as the determining factor as to what you should or shouldn't eat. Let's see. High histamine foods trigger migraines, so will IgE testing help eliminate migraines? No, IgE testing will help you discern what you might be reacting to that could help trigger those migraines. So eliminating foods that you have IgE response to could help reduce your migraine symptoms. Let's see. How much will these tests you're recommending cost? Depends. DAO is pretty expensive because it's a highly specialized test. So if you're paying out of pocket, it's going to cost somewhere probably in the $300 to $400 range for DAO. Some of these other tests, they're in the hundreds as well. So micronutrient testing, average cost is somewhere in between $400 and $500, depending on the extensive nature of which kind of panel that you're running. Food allergy testing, IgE testing, you can get your doctor to run that. That, if you've got insurance, you could get that one to get covered. But delayed hypersensitivity testing, depending on how many items you have tested for, it ranges in the hundreds. And if you have enough things tested, can get up into the $1,000 range. So it just depends on what all you're looking at, what all your doctor's wanting to measure. Perthus asks, do I carry one type of probiotic or more than one? So we carry a lot of different kinds. We have Ultrabiotic Defense, which are really, really high dose probiotic for gut support in people post antibiotics. And then we have kind of maintenance level probiotics. We have one called Biotic Defense, and then we have another one called Biotic Defense with S. boulardii, which is helpful in people that are trying to deal with mold or yeast. And then we have another one called Biotic Force, which is a spore probiotic that's designed more for people that are sensitive or high histamine that can't handle lactobacillus-based probiotics. So we have a whole arsenal of different types of probiotics at Gluten-Free Society for those reasons. Does iodine help with the healing process? It can, especially for those that are deficient in iodine. Is it safe to take NAC daily? Yes, it is. It's not, I wouldn't recommend taking like mega dosing NAC daily indefinitely, but it's perfectly fine and safe to take 500 milligrams a day without any untoward side effects. Let's see, Robbie asks, when I eat certain foods, my nose will start running. Is that a histamine reaction? No, not necessarily. You could have eaten something in that food that your immune system said, hey, we're not sure about that. Make more mucus to put down a stronger barrier in front of that food, so that food, if there is something dangerous in that food, we're going to have, immune systems and weapons in place, because your mucus is a physical barrier, but there's also IgA, the secretory IgA, which is an antibody that you produce. It's a first line of defense that acts to bind antigens or things that might be bad in that food. So again, every time you eat, there could be something potentially bad, even if you're not allergic to the food per se. And that's what that mucus, that's what that innate immune system does. It's so important, is to protect you, from things on a daily basis. If I take Hist Assist, how much more quercetin should I take? If you're really struggling, I would take upwards of 3 to 4 grams of quercetin a day during allergy season. If you're not really struggling, Hist Assist might be enough. It might be enough for you to take, and you don't need to take extra. I would just kind of play it by ear. Scroll down on both sides for me. Yeah, so Beverly says, I'm worried about taking daily over-the-counter antihistamines. You should be. I mean, even though they're over-the-counter, it doesn't mean that you should take them indefinitely. A lot of doctors just say, take it for the rest of your life. That's insanity. Remember what antihistamines are. They block your immune system's response. We don't want to block histamines indefinitely. We want to figure out why they're high. We want to figure out why we're symptomatic. Some people do have environmental allergens, but most people have bad choices where they're choosing the wrong foods, and their body's immune system's so busy trying to fight the food that there aren't enough resources left to deal with external allergens. And so we become allergenic. We have, allergies all the time. I get this all the time in my practice, where people come to me and say, yeah, my allergist told me just to stay on the drug for the rest of my life. And they're like, but he told me I had seasonal allergies. Well, seasonal allergies means that you have allergies that come and wane, or they come and go or wane during allergy season, like spring season or fall season. But if you're having to take them year round all the time, you've got a bigger problem in your diet, most likely. That would be my first guess. How much vitamin C is safe to take by IV? Gosh, you can get a vitamin C IV upwards, 100 plus grams a day. I mean, better question to ask the doctor that's prescribing it to you. I mean, again, if you're going to a doctor that's not an expert in IV, they shouldn't be the one doing the IV. How do you get our products in Toronto, Canada? I think you can order online, but if you try and you can't, I know we have a lot of Canadian customers. Go to glutenology@gmail. Reach out to my customer service team at glutenology@gmail.com and ask for Jessica, and she can guide you, because I'm fairly certain we do regularly ship to Canada. Let's see. Can bovine serum immunoglobulins or colostrum increase the secretory IgA levels in the gut? No, they can't. They can support antibody in the gut, but they act as surrogate antibodies, so they're not actually going to help you make more IgA. One of the primary nutrients involved in helping you make more IgA is L-glutamine. The amino acid L-glutamine is a prerequisite for the production of immunoglobulin A. So we see a lot of times people are deficient in L-glutamine and they can't properly produce IgA. We also see people with IgA levels that are low, and that gluten sensitivity can cause that. So if a person is gluten sensitive and continues to eat gluten, their IgA levels over time drop, and that, so too does part of their immune reactivity or function. Is there a connection between histamines and Meniere's disease? I haven't seen a direct connection. That doesn't mean that one doesn't exist, but we know, Meniere's disease is damage to the vestibulocochlear nerve in the ear, or in the inner ear. It's a cranial nerve, and again, we know histamines are neurotoxic or can be neuroexcitatory. So there's a plausible component to, in my opinion, that you could make a correlation there potentially. And I have seen people with low histamine diets report improvements in balance and reduction in ear ringing. So those are definitely possibilities. Okay, I think we're over time and we don't have any absence. I think we've got more questions than we have time for. So, hey, tune in next week. Come back and visit me. Hey, we're going to be talking over the next few weeks about some really critical topics. One of the topics I'm going to be really diving into is how to prepare yourself for the upcoming year in terms of preparedness. So we're going to be doing a deep dive on getting ready, what you need, what types of foods you need to store, what types of things you need to really be focusing on doing right now to make sure that you're ready should the supply chain diminish any further than what it's already diminished, so that, again, you can maintain your good health even in the absence of adequate supply. So we're going to be doing a big show on that. So again, if you want to get notified, come visit me at Gluten Free Society. Make sure you sign up for our newsletter. It's the one way I can ensure that you won't be censored, or that we won't be censored from you. All of our other channels censor us regularly. So if you want to hear from me on the regular, you got to go to glutenfreesociety.org and make sure you sign up. I hope you have a fantastic week. We'll see you next Monday for another episode of Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain. Take care. Hey, if you've got a functional medicine or health question that you'd like me to answer for you, make sure you send me an email, glutenology@gmail.com, and we'll do our best to create a video answer just for you. Have a great day.